This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast presented by ClutchPoints. Like, follow, and subscribe. Rate us, review us, all that other fun stuff. Wherever you get your podcasts, it's Apple, Spotify, and, of course, on YouTube. My name is Sheldon Alexander. And, of course, I'm joined by my dude, the man, the myth, the legend, my guy, Mr. Matt Russell, sports betting professional and creator of The Window, available on Substack and via podcast. We're up bright and early on a Wednesday morning because my guy likes to help me out when my sched gets a little hectic. I know there's a lots going on your sched as well, including trying to fit in some extra, some time on the course, while we still can, because there's like a heat wave going on in the city of Toronto right now where, you can get some extra rounds going in here, no?
Yeah, listen, I have to fit in with the country club set, right? I got my white on right now, trying to fit in. We are, of course, at the beginning of the end now. Of course, I'm talking about the second half of the NFL season.
Yeah. Week 10.
Week 10 is definitely what I'm talking about. Yeah, man. So we'll just leave it at that. Let's get on with the football so we can literally talk about anything else other than what people are talking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, I am shook right now for multiple reasons, but the reasons that I will discuss on an open microphone are my picks. And last week, 6-9 record against the spread for me here. And if there's one thing I am, it's trying to be honest here, as a season record is now 67, 69, and 2. But Week 10 provides new opportunity for us here on the pod, and we will keep the good times rolling. For those people that might be new to what exactly happens on the pod, I'm going to give you my pick to each and every game against the spread, and then Matt comes in with the information and education on where the line was, where it is, where it could be heading into kickoff. The hope is we'll come out on the other side with a much more informed pick. I play the role of the viewer. Sometimes Matt convinces me to change my pick, and other times I foolishly don't listen. That's a joke. That's a bit. That's the show. And as mentioned, I told you the record, and a big part of said record, one thing that you'll notice for me making picks on this podcast is if you happen to look up and you see results like last week in which favorites were 14-1 straight up and 10-5 against the spread, that normally will be bad for me making picks, because what I like to do is picking underdogs. And now what's happening is now I'm like caught in the middle. Am I hitting favorites? Am I hitting underdogs? This is why we talk things through on the podcast. And this is why, we're going to get right to it. We're going to start things off as we always do. Thursday night football. We are talking Baltimore Ravens, 6-point favorites at home to the Cincinnati Bengals. Got to say, I think this is a weight class, right? I think Baltimore is just rolling right now. They're two teams that just seem to be on a collision course in terms of just dominating games and dominating teams between the Ravens and Lions right now. So I want to lay the points here at 6. And of course, that is aided by the stat I just gave off the top of the podcast. But this is why we talk things through. And I know these teams recently played. So I would like to start by asking you the question, my friend. How, if these teams just played, and it was a fairly close game, how do we get to Ravens -6 here? Does that make sense? What's the market telling us?
No, that's fair. That's actually a really good question, because obviously the Ravens, from a market perspective, right, like couldn't be hotter, even with that loss to the Browns, right? They didn't get that much of a downgrade, if at all, before the game against the Broncos last week, where they were 9.5-point favorites. And it took, I think, multiple days of Lamar Jackson not playing to see that come down to -8 for a little bit. So if you were on top of things on Friday, you might have been able to tease the Ravens, as you'd like to talk about, right? When you see a -8 or -8.5, you don't really think the underdog has much of a chance to win. It's a pretty good chance to take a teaser leg there. And then, of course, Lamar's fine, and it's right back up to 9.5. And by the way, you didn't need the teaser leg if you like the Ravens, because they just went and won by 1 billion points, right? Last game they played, you said, they played relatively recently. It was what? Do you have it on hand? What week that actually was here, Ruby?
Yeah, I can find it. Yes.
Sorry, I've got week 5. We're good. So if you took the ratings from like the current ratings right now, and you extrapolated that to what the point spread would be for that game, Baltimore and Cincinnati in week 5, you would get Baltimore minus 2.5. The line for that game was Baltimore minus 2.5, right? So like nothing's really changed from a rating perspective since week 5 in this game. And so you could make the case, well, I think Baltimore has gotten better since that game. You could say that Cincinnati's gotten a little bit better, but honestly, I don't really have an argument one way or another for changing the ratings for either team, because sometimes Baltimore's played well, sometimes they haven't. Sometimes Cincinnati's played well, sometimes they haven't. That's why we have the range, right? And so I go into this game going like, okay, we have to then decide, okay, if there isn't like an obvious like rating mismatch or something incorrect or an overvaluation or an undervaluation, I have to look at how these two teams are going to play against each other and whether I think that the Ravens are going to have a high-end performance or a low-end performance. Do I think the Bengals are going to have a high-end performance or a low-end performance? And I think a lot of times, we talk about like the divisional game. This was like an antiquated concept, right? Divisional game, like getting points, et cetera, et cetera. Like these teams know each other so well and all of that kind of thing. But like, if I absolutely had to make a pick right now, like I think that's the way that I would be certainly leaning, and with a little more research into this, I can sort of come up with stuff to sort of back that up. And so if I had to make a pick here, I think it's +6 on Cincinnati. We've seen the line move from 6.5, if that means anything to anybody, right? So like when you're looking at a line that opened at 6.5 and you go, okay, like which way does it go? A lot of times you see a 6.5 and you go like, I want to bet this at, Ravens minus 6.5 before it gets to 7. It's been the other direction, right? There has been no waiting to see if it gets to 7 for the Cincinnati bettors. So short week, people having to register their opinion relatively quickly for this game. Seems to me the market has been leaning towards the Bengals in this one. Now, injury issues abound for Cincinnati, right? We didn't have T. Higgins last week. And to me, that felt like, hey, I think we can beat the Raiders without T. Higgins. Let's just make sure that we have him ready for Thursday. Because the one thing, when you look back and you said, it was a relatively close game, it was just a relatively close game. The Bengals had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter and absolutely gacked that up and then lost in overtime. You'll remember the whole field goal fiasco and Zach Taylor refusing to try to get yards by throwing with Joe Burrow, who had like 500 yards passing. Most of those yards passing were to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So that tells me from a matchup perspective that the Ravens, who have struggled with pass defense all season long, even when their top guys were healthy, are vulnerable to what Joe Burrow can do, right? So if I think there's one significant mismatch that is a little bit different than when the Ravens play literally every other team, then that would be sort of the case, right, for the Bengals, knowing that at any given moment, right, they can score, they can have a nice drive, they can come back. Obviously, you don't want to blow the 10-point lead that they had last time, but the fact that they had a 10-point lead is certainly a lot more than most teams have been doing against the Ravens this season. So I think this is Cincinnati +6 here. Just obviously market indications telling me that maybe that's the right side, and some matchup stuff in there as well.
Yeah, and you'll see me do this a lot this week, especially, when the flag is out. By the way, the flag is out for our people watching on the pod, but for our listeners as well, the pick is out and the pick has changed to the Bengals +6. And really what you're going to hear from me a lot this week is the reminder of, for me, if I think I'm struggling, it's okay, well, I'm going to still follow the basics, and the basics of certain things like, hey, I'm going to take the points at more than a field goal in a divisional matchup, unless,
right,
a really trash team is involved, right? And even still, you get the Panthers last week, right? So, which we'll get to, of course, but you know what I mean? So I'm going to really stick to the basics here and try to get back to some principles and lean in on some things like that. And again, it's Thursday night. So, hey, we're talking math, we're talking probabilities. As much as talking math and probabilities really have been frustrating the last 24 hours, but I digress and I move on before any of us get ourselves into trouble. Can we move on to, of all places, Germany?
I mean,
that's a landmine, right?
Yeah. I mean, we sort of are, so we might as well.
Oh, we move on to the Giants, who are 6-point favorites in Germany against the Panthers. Why on earth are we sending I guess it would make sense. We probably should ship the Giants and Panthers to Germany, but not make it an NFL game. But that's for another day. This game is in Germany, and the Panthers won outright last week, which is a sentence I can't believe I'm saying. But if you go back to our conversation last week about that game, where I started was the Saints should not be favored on the road by 7 points, I think it was, versus anybody. And then they proceeded to lose the game to the Panthers. So now we move and we fast forward here. And I'm going to be on the Panthers +6 because that's a lot of points. We have the X factor of both these trash teams traveling to Germany. And the Giants have lost 4 in a row and have not covered any of those 4 games. So here we are. And maybe I'm going to think that, are we seeing building blocks here from Bryce Young? Or is just, the Giants defense is going to be too much for a Panthers team that is overmatched a lot.
Yeah. I mean, listen, so last week, obviously the one upset in the entire week by, just as everybody predicted, right? The Carolina Panthers. So a lot of people talk about, and we've talked about it, and we can talk about it a little bit more if you want, but like the idea that 3 of the last 4 weeks, the overwhelming amount of favorites to not just win and cover has thrown like a wrench into this season where, we talked about, numbers and sample sizes and probabilities and stuff like that. At the end of the season, we're probably just going to get the same number that we always get, which is like favorites and underdogs, about 50%, maybe 50.1, 50.2, something like that. And it's going to be this season because there was a crazy run of underdogs for the first 5 weeks and then a crazy run of favorites for the second 5 weeks, right? It is a very bizarre sort of sample size that, I can explain it because we don't know at the start of the season who's going to be good and who's going to be bad, and therefore the market can be incorrect. I can't really explain why we can't catch up to how bad some of these teams are. But the thing for me that has been the twist and kind of annoying, more than just the idea that like favorites are going to, excel at the start, in the middle of the season, is that from a rating perspective, we have all these teams who get like rated really poorly or really high, and we assume that we should bet against them. So I'm using like Carolina as the example, right? We talked about the idea last week that like this was a made up point spread, right? Like Saints -7 is just like everybody, not just odds makers, because if odds makers were particularly wrong, everybody would just pile in on Carolina and like just waving bags of cash, right? But that's not what happened. Nothing really happened to that line because it pretty much stuck at 7. There was some like slight drift towards 7.5 of all things. But the point is like that line was created for the Carolina Panthers to cover that game. It was like the bar was set so low. It was literally like, just take one step. All you need is one step and you're going to be able to cover this game. But that was the case the week before against Denver when that line was like multiple scores, right? And so the point is like Denver covers that game because it's football. And, once the ball gets rolled out on the field, like who knows what's going to happen. So they win by 14. They cover the even huge number of, I think got like 12 or 13 at that time. Right. And so you go like, oh, come on. Right. Because you're like, I was asking, like begging for you to cover Carolina. And then the second week of asking and begging for a Carolina cover, it works, but it doesn't help you because it was like, guys, like we needed that reaction the week before, because now if you just bet Carolina in both games, you're 1-1, or you got scared off because of that first game and you didn't even bet Carolina when they were rated historically bad, which is what we talked about last week with them being a 15 out of 100. So then you go to this game.
Can I just jump in for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
2 things. One, the Broncos were favored by 9 points 2 weeks ago, and 2,
I think it got higher than that.
Yeah, I think it did by game time.
Wednesday. Yeah, it was 9 on Wednesday, but it got to like 12.
And 2, the thing that swayed me last week that we laughed at was, oh wait, Derek Carr's back.
Yeah,
Saints -7. All right, what? I'm okay with that. Which is an insane statement to make. Which I said at the time, but it's still hilarious.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Because and it's a perfect example of like not knowing what the other side we're supposed to expect from the other side with Derek Carr being back and being like, is that a good thing, or is that or does obviously that's a good thing relative to what they were dealing with before, but like how good of a thing is it? And But the reality is, though, you also look at the game and how it played out, and you go like, the Saints should have won that game by 1 billion points, because like just look at Alvin Kamara's stat line alone,
Yeah.
right? And it's just like, oh, okay, then how did they lose this game? And like, I don't know, it's the Saints. And then they fire the coach, because like when you lose games like that, like that's a pretty good indication that you're poorly coached, right? So like you can do all this stuff, you can't just win the actual game. So I guess so where I was going with this was, okay, Carolina was sitting at a rating of 15 out of 100, which is so low that you are sort of compelled to bet on them, because it's like no team can be that bad, can they? Yeah. And they only go 1-1 while rated as a 15, because now this week you go, okay, well maybe Carolina's not bad, and like as you said, or not that bad, I should say, because that would have been historically bad, and that like Bryce Young, like maybe he's got something going and all that sort of thing, right? So the market goes, all right, let's kick the Panthers back up to 20 out of 100, which, as you know, is sort of our floor, where it's like, okay, like that's bad, but it's not like historically bad where I absolutely have to bet on Carolina. And the betting market has looked at that and gone, no, I'm still going to bet on the Giants, because that line at 20 was a 4.5 point spread. And so you go, well, what are we dealing with the Giants here? Because are you going to move them up because they lost and didn't cover against the Commanders last week? It's like, that was a competitive game, but like, I'm not going to re-rate the Giants in a big way. So this is the market, the odds makers readjusting Carolina back to like a 20, which is again, bottom of the barrel. Yeah. And then the market looking at this matchup, because the Panthers got dominated from a box score perspective last week, and then saying like, I'm still out on the Panthers. They can't run the football. The Giants are going to be able to run the football. Daniel Jones is going to have time to throw, all of those sorts of things. And 4.5 was too low for their blood, if you will. And again, I don't think you can move that back for, the Giants up a little bit. But moving Carolina back to 15, like just as sort of a round number, gets you to -6 in this game on a neutral field. So they're back to being a 15, and maybe they deserve it.
Yeah, it's getting me to switch the pick to that, because the most important things here is understanding exactly what you just explained with the ratings and how the box score affects the rating. So everyone sees the final score and they're like, oh, Panthers won. Cool. I guess this happened. And it's like, that's not really how that game played out, right? No. Like Derek Carr did not help. And it was a bleep show. Show that bad that their coach got immediately fired after losing that game, right? And I think that's all you need to know. Pick has been switched to the Giants -6, and I will not be waking up early to watch this game. But when I do tune in, I hope to see Daniel Jones, his run for a touchdown and, maybe 150 yards passing, whatever it is. But Giants, cool. Let's do it. We got 2 picks in. I like where we're at right now. Feeling good, feeling confident.
Just to throw like an exclamation point on it, right? 25-15 first downs in favor of the Saints, 427 yards to 246 yards for the Saints, 5.8 yards per play to 4.9 yards per play for the Saints. They ran for 197 yards while the Panthers ran for 80 yards, and they only lost the turnover battle by 1. Right? Like, I don't know how you lose that game, but they did. So the guy's gone.
Yeah. And now their coach is cooked. I mean, it makes sense. Like, I mean, I don't know who wouldn't fire their coach after that performance.
No.
We move on to, we'll stick with the NFC East and the Eagles, who are on the road as 7-point favorites in Dallas to take on the Cowboys. Dak Prescott is out. And the Cowboys were already trash with Dak Prescott. CeeDee Lamb banged up too. We're getting Cooper Rush, I'm pretty sure. We've seen Cooper Rush before. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's a 7-point Eagles spread on the road. And I'll say this much.
Okay.
I'm going to lay the points with the Eagles here. 7 points at home because it's a divisional game, so they should still be up for it despite how bad Dallas is.
Uh-huh.
But I got to be honest. Nick Sirianni has me worried, man. I don't know how they didn't cover last week. He tried his hardest to not cover last week, and he was successful in making them not cover last week. But he has me worried. That's the only thing that has me hesitating on this pick being Eagles -7.
Yeah, and like kind of drifty towards 7.5.
Okay.
Earlier in the week, anyway. I'm just going to double check that it's pretty much a flat 7 right now. Because it's still pretty drifty, right? Like you can get plus 7.5, minus 120. So, maybe it's not done moving necessarily. And the reason I bring it up.
Okay.
So yes, the Cowboys were trash within the context of what I'm going to say what we were hoping the Cowboys were going to be, because
what expectations
were, or just for the general entertainment of the league and all that sort of thing. So they were trash relative to that, because we expected out of a bye week a better effort against the 49ers, where maybe you play fourth quarters for once, and they just don't, right? So like same thing against the Falcons last week, right? Where it's like, they just skip a quarter. And we don't know when it's going to happen. A lot of times it's, the first quarter. A lot of times it's the first quarter at home. Sometimes it's the fourth quarter. A lot of times maybe even the third quarter. Who knows? So that Cowboys team that we sort of expected a lot out of, or something out of, and that's really what it comes down to, right? Something. That team was rated above average, then average, et cetera, et cetera. And part of the problem with them being quote unquote trash is their quarterback kept throwing interceptions, right?
Correct.
Like if you literally can expect 2 interceptions per game from your quarterback, like again, we've talked about this before. There's only like 10 possessions in an NFL football game. If you're just going to give away 2 of them with interceptions beyond sort of where they are in the field, or whether those interceptions get returned for touchdowns, whatever, if you're just going to give away those 2 possessions, that's going to be a problem. So with this number, you go, okay, man, it's a pretty high number for the Eagles on the road, and your man Sirianni, who last week had people booing a 2-point conversion that I think if you took a vote, again, who knows what the results could possibly be with a vote these days, but like if you took a vote, they would all say like, yeah, you're supposed to go for 2 if you're up 12, because you want to make it 14, especially in the fourth quarter. But they were so shell-shocked and beat down by the fact that he had gone for 2 in what they didn't really think was analytically plus scenarios, or that they just didn't succeed in those scenarios. They were just like, no more 2-point conversions. I can't do it anymore. Like, stop it. Like, I don't care if it's the right thing to do, right? It's like when you bet on the Chiefs every week, or pick the Chiefs every week at a big point spread. I'm like, telling you, man, like, no, like this is the right thing to do. You're like, no, don't tell me I can't do that. It's the same thing with the Eagles. They're like, stop it. So the point, so to your point, it's like, all right, are you that excited about what the Eagles are doing on a weekly basis? And listen, they got screwed on that Saquon Barkley fumble. That was a completely ridiculous call, a ridiculous ruling and officiating and, review process and all of that kind of thing. Which again, like, who the hell knows, right? Because none of it even matters anymore. So all of this is to say is, like, if you give a week of preparation for Cooper Rush, who came in and was not bad against the Falcons.
Yeah. Okay.
And they, thankfully the Cowboys didn't cover, because we were on the Falcons in that game pretty aggressively. And but the point is like they only lost by 6. And the same way that they only lost by 6 the week before against the 49ers. And, against the Ravens, that final score ended up only being 3 points, right? Just by getting sort of blown out throughout that entire game. So the point is like this team, while trash, part of the reason they were trash was the quarterback was playing poorly. So how much are you going to downgrade the Cowboys further because a quarterback that was playing poorly is gone just because his name is Dak Prescott and he makes that much money? Like that's, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's also maybe not that bad of a thing. And so we look at the rating, right? And the Cowboys are rated as a 32 with Cooper Rush. Like, we're talking about a team like the Raiders or the Titans or the Patriots. And I don't think the Raiders, Titans, or Patriots stay within 6 or get to within 6 of the Falcons last week, or the 49ers before that, et cetera, right? So I think, as kind of gross as it sort of feels to say, is that the Cowboys now might be underrated with Cooper Rush, because, again, the change from a quarterback that wasn't playing very well to a quarterback who has been on the Cowboys for a long period of time, right? He's played the Eagles. That was 2 years ago when Dak got hurt, right? So he's been on the team for a long time. For all of the changes that the Cowboys like to make and upgrades here and upgrades there, they have been pretty content with Cooper Rush this whole time. But because Dak had a good season last year, and you're never going to bench Dak for any sort of length of time, we just don't see Cooper Rush. until he comes out last week. And again, he plays pretty well. And so I just look at this and I go, yeah, I'm waiting around to see if we can get that flat +7.5, or like see how much I might have to pay for it. And I'm going to be on the Cowboys this week because this Eagles team, they're all right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They are right. And it's just like, I'm not going to lay 7 with the Eagles just because Dak Prescott is out. Because honestly, Cooper Rush might throw fewer interceptions and made, less catastrophic plays than Dak Prescott currently was doing.
No, all of that totally valid. The one thing I want to check as I'm talking and killing time as I click to it is what's CeeDee Lamb's status? Is he's not even listed on the injury report? Okay. Nope, questionable right now. And your favorite, considered week to week. But there's optimism he'll play next Sunday against the Eagles.
Could play next week, might be on his deathbed week to week.
Shout out to the NFL. It's not like there's billions of dollars at stake here to figure this stuff out.
It took them this long to find the loophole to just say week to week.
Such scammers.
Like, what are we? How do we get around this? It's like, I don't know. Like 4 years later, somebody comes into a meeting and it's like week to week. And you're like, why do we think about that? Oh man, it's like it's long enough.
I will say I almost flipped this pick, but I need to one more week to be fully mad at Sirianni, and 1 week just to see Cooper Rush being anybody, right? Because the line here would be laying points with the Eagles on the road versus anybody. I need to see that Cooper Rush and a healthy CeeDee Lamb or good CeeDee Lamb.
For sure. Other thing with the injury report, right? It looks like, and this is Wednesday morning, who knows? Maybe getting Micah Parsons back.
Ooh,
right? Like, I think that's a thing as well. So
that matters.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see.
So another example of why you need to follow on the social medias, follow Matt on Substack, get all the updates as we get closer to the games for sure. Eagles, I was going to say fly, Eagles fly, but the Niners hat that's on my head and the Niners hat that's behind me won't allow me to say fly, Eagles fly in their Eagles voice. So I'm just going to move on to the next game.
People have a big enough screen that they can tell that that's a 49ers hat, by the way.
I'll zoom in. We move on to the Bills.
Or maybe the ratings will improve if they don't. I don't know. Who knows? I don't know.
Oh, what are we doing here? Where am I here? Bills at Colts. As we get through this pod somehow, some way on this day. Bills, 4-point road favorites.
Yeah.
Against the Colts. And the Colts and Joe Flacco. I mean, I don't think that the Colts and Joe Flacco are a good team, but I will say this is normally a prime spot where we would be betting on Joe Flacco as a home dog against a Bills team. But here's my question though. I feel like the Bills beat bad teams. That's just who the Bills are right now. Like some people have them as, they're up in the tier of the top of the AFC, whether you're talking about Baltimore, whether you're talking about KC, and I don't really have them there, but I think they solidly beat, let's look at this, right? They beat the Cards in week 1. They beat the Jags, the Jets, the Titans, the Dolphins. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they just beat bad teams, and the Colts still, to me, qualify as a bad team. So my question is 4 points too many though?
Yeah, I was right there
That's
with
the
you. Everything that you said, and the answer to that for me is yes, right? Because you mentioned like they beat bad teams and all that sort of thing, right? And there's two ways to put that, right? Does that mean when they play bad teams that they beat them and they cover the spread all the time, or does that mean that their record is propped up by the fact that they have played so many bad teams? And you mentioned one team that that they're sort of allegedly in contention with, the Kansas City Chiefs. Guess who they're playing next week? We are going to get, right, that annual litmus test, if you will, for the Buffalo Bills against the Kansas City Chiefs next week. Does that mean there's a look-ahead element to this game and all that kind of stuff? I don't know. All I can tell you, though, is that the Bills' rating is on the move upwards. the Colts rating has been moved down. And what did we not like about the Colts last week? It was a fundamental issue with the idea that just because Joe Flacco was going to play in that game, that the Colts needed to be rated as an above average team. Now we'll talk about you're waving the challenge flag already? You're switching?
Yeah.
What's happening right now? You're switching to the
going.
Bills? You distracted me with the flag. I'm like, he's changing. I'm not even trying to talk you into changing. I like your pick. Stay with the pick. Let me finish.
There's just chaos going on in the world right now. Keep going.
Yeah, but again, does it all matter? No. So the thing we didn't like about the Colts last week, right? Joe Flacco's in. Like, line has to come down. Vikings were -7 and like has to get down to like 5, 4.5. And it's like, guys, like, you're getting that excited about Joe Flacco. You all need to calm down. Like, it's just Joe Flacco. He is basically like a slightly steadier version than Jameis Winston, right? Like, you don't know on any given week, depending on the defense that you're going to play, like what you're going to get. And he gets the Minnesota Vikings defense on the road. You watch the game on Sunday night, right? It's just complete, speaking of chaos, right? Complete chaos with the Vikings, like coming out every direction. Like, like, I don't know, like just throwing the ball wherever he wants to throw the ball. And he didn't turn the ball over that much. He had, I think, one interception that we had a bet on for that game. And so now you get to go home and you get to face the Bills defense. And what did we like about the Bills going into last week? And it was the idea that they were a good matchup against the Miami Dolphins. And the thing that we were wrong about is that they were a good matchup against the Miami Dolphins offense because they could not get the Miami Dolphins offense off the field. Now, the Bills offense in and of itself was almost good enough to cover that number on their own, but you make a couple of mistakes, right? Keon Coleman doesn't catch a pass at the goal line. It gets intercepted. A couple of penalties on what pretty sketchy penalties, but on what probably should have been a Josh Allen touchdown run. And all of a sudden, right, there's 10, 11 points that go off the board because of those two mistakes. And maybe it doesn't come down to a Tyler Bass, like 60 million yard field goal, right? So my point is that I think it's going to be a lot easier this week for Joe Flacco because, as weird as it sounds, Tua and Flacco are pretty similar quarterbacks, right? Like, you're not getting the dual threat element. Yes, one's right-handed and tall, one's left-handed and maybe not as tall. But I think both of them kind of present the same challenges in that they're both very accurate and they can both sort of sit in the pocket and get to work. What I like about the Colts in general, right, is their ability to stop the run. And you saw that last week against the Vikings, but the Vikings are good enough with Kevin O'Connell calling plays and Sam Darnold. It was dicey in the first half with a couple of turnovers, but like, he can find these receivers. And the Bills have struggled this season throwing the football when the run game isn't necessarily working. When the run game is working, they're fine, right? They can use play action, they can swing it out to James Cook, all of that sort of stuff. So I just look at this game and I look at it and I go, I think this is two teams that are, kind of a bit of a buy low, sell high situation here, where I want to sell the Bills a little bit going into that game next week against the Chiefs. And I want to buy the Colts a little bit going into this game. And so that's going to be the play for me in the Colts. I just want to double check to see what the opening line in this game was from just a market perspective. Okay. Open 4.5, went to 4. And honestly, right now, I'm kind of seeing a lot of 3.5s, right? Okay. So again, from an early market reading perspective, there's a little bit more 3.5s here than I care to admit. There's flat 4s. There's 4s and there's 3.5s. Okay. I don't know if you want to reference particular sports books, but so like I think right now, get the 4s while you can with the Colts here. That's certainly my plan. I think they could potentially win this game outright.
The flag is out. The flag was there. This is, again, basics. Home dogs more than a field goal.
Did you have the Bills -4? Is that on me?
I did.
I not even know?
Yeah. No, I did have the Bills -4 to start.
Okay. That's my fault, everybody.
No. That's all right.
I thought you had the Colts the whole way.
No. I had the
Bills.
Bills.
I have to go back and check the tape. I screwed up there.
No, that's okay. I had the Bills -4 to start. And right away, as we started talking about it, it's like, wait a second. I need the sound effect, the Nate Dogg, hold up. Hey.
Oh, we should have that.
Right?
Speaking of like taking multiple years to come up with something that seems so obvious. Right? Week to week, the Nate Dogg sound effect. Like, right? Oh yeah. Right. Obviously.
Colts +4 is the pick. We move on to the aforementioned Chiefs. And you just brought up something very interesting to me because, of course, I'm starting on laying 8 points at home with the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Chiefs won and, of course, did not cover in one of the funniest games for me to watch as still a bitter San Francisco 49ers fan in terms of watching Baker, ya boy, and Todd Bowles, probably, ya boy. Maybe I was going to call him like Fools or Foles. I don't know what I did there. But anyways, the point is,
you wouldn't be wrong.
they score the touchdown and they have a decision to make. And they're at the goal line and it's like, what do you want to do here? Do you want to go for 2 and win and a chance to win the game, or go to overtime with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs? And the reason I bring this up as the bitter San Francisco 49ers fan, but also the guy who comes on this pod and lays the points with the Chiefs and then laughs about it, is the fact that when you watch the Chiefs carefully, I swear Andy Reid has a part of his playbook that just says plays that always work.
Yeah.
Right?
Like the good plays.
Yeah. And then like he just brings those out when it's needed. Like, I don't know, when you go to overtime and you can win by just scoring a touchdown and the other team doesn't get the ball. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah. I say all that to say, here I am laying the points with the Chiefs, but you did bring up you just brought up a really good point that I'd like to discuss. Could the Chiefs be looking ahead to their matchup versus Buffalo?
I don't. Those things, and again, I brought it up, so I'm to blame here. But those things are always retrofitted, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, they were looking ahead, and you say that after the fact, right? Because we don't often go and like look ahead to the next week and be like, oh, this team's got this game, so like look ahead spot, right? Because maybe Cincinnati doesn't blow out the Raiders if they were looking ahead to a Thursday night game against the Ravens, and vice versa with the Ravens against the, right? So it's like, well, that didn't happen, so we never had to be brought up again, right? So
yeah,
I will say this game for me. Well, first of all, it's the Chiefs game, so anything over a touchdown, you automatically take the underdog and you ask questions later. So
yes,
Duh. Come on, Shell, like come on, man. The other thing is like I look at the game last week between Denver and Baltimore and I go like, all right, scoreboard, not exactly what you're looking for when it comes to the Denver Broncos. But I also look and I go, you know what? Not the worst performance I've ever seen from at least like a metric standpoint, right? We talked about the idea of the, I've got an ad popping up here as I look up the box score.
No problem.
For radio.
Hey, it's
390.
Blame the control room.
Control room was a disaster over here. 396 to 319 for Baltimore last week.
Okay.
Not the craziest disparity. We just talked about a disparity between Carolina and New Orleans that was quite a bit different. 25-20 on first downs. And obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but in my opinion, that game flipped on that touchdown at the end of the second quarter, right? That is a 7-point, if I'm not mistaken, 17-10 game. And a couple of things, right? The Broncos give the ball back to the Ravens so that they have time to try to go down and quote unquote get a field goal. They do better than that because the Broncos secondary completely lost trying to tackle Zay Flowers. I believe it was Zay Flowers. Which, I mean, listen, a lot of people are going to be lost trying to tackle Zay Flowers. So again, a 41-10, like it looks like a blowout. It was in fact a blowout, but from a metric perspective, like the Broncos weren't that bad. And so I go, okay, you're going to downgrade the Broncos like pretty significantly off of that. I'm like, I don't think you should necessarily, in the same way that I don't think the Chiefs should get an upgrade just because they won in overtime against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I'm watching that game on Monday with an eye on the game on Sunday going like, can the Broncos do this against the Kansas City Chiefs? And I think the answer for me is Bo Nix can do that. Right? Like it was what Baker Mayfield completed 2 passes in regulation, 2 wide receivers, right? He didn't have his wide receivers. Everybody was worried about it. The line was over a touchdown because of it. And it didn't matter regarding the point spread because, again, that line probably should have been around 6. We probably should have been sweating overtime. We probably should have been annoyed that the Chiefs scored a touchdown in overtime. We should probably be even more mad at Todd Bowles for not going for a 2-point conversion. It just happens to be an anecdote now because the spread was still covered and we didn't have any sort of, round robin underdog money line parlay tied in to the Buccaneers winning, even though we thought that the Buccaneers had a chance to win. If you go back and check the tape, That's what we talked about. And so a
true.
plus 350 money line bet would have been a good bet. It just didn't win. Again, it doesn't mean that Todd Bowles was going to get the 2-point conversion, but you saw the look on Baker Mayfield's face when they lost the coin toss, right? My guy knew that the game was jammed done when that thing went the wrong way. He picked tails, it was heads, and the ball game was over because Andy Reid is a genius, right? And he's one of 3 coaches, I'm going to say, who goes into halftime, makes a bunch of changes, and all of a sudden the run game works.
Yeah.
I'm not smart enough to know why, like, all of a sudden Kareem Hunt was doing work in the second half.
Can we talk about this? Sure. I don't understand. Kareem Hunt washed, goes to the Chiefs. Totally. He's tearing it up on my fantasy team right now. Right. Hopkins washed, goes to the Chiefs. My guy's doing, remember the Titans dances in the end zone. Like, Andy Reid, you're right. Yes,
putting
Mahomes
people
is
in
really,
position
really good
to succeed. Yes, putting people in position to succeed. That's all it is.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
It took Kareem Hunt 90 carries to have one of more than 13.5 yards. This season, like, it took him 90 tries. He's not popping off long runs, right? But like, they're finding the creases and they're making the small adjustments that 2-yard and 1-yard gains become 5 and 10-yard gains. And it's just like, that's what NFL coaching looks like. And if it means you have to be a head coach for 25 years to get this stuff figured out, then, like, man, we're all screwed, because none of these coaches, I should say none, but most of these coaches aren't getting 25 years to, like, get good at the job to the level that Andy Reid is. So I say all of that, and I'm like, yeah, Broncos, because, I can say that I think the Broncos can do what the Buccaneers did, both offensively and defensively. Short week, all of that stuff. You can throw the look ahead stuff in there if you want to. But fundamentally, right, it's the Chiefs are content with winning by a touchdown, and this line is over a touchdown. And so, like, maybe they don't cover, but you got to take the Broncos here.
Are you surprised here that I'm going to change the pick? And I'm
no, because I think it's, everybody sees or remembers what they saw most recently, right? And so when you're getting back-to-back point spreads of over a touchdown, and you just watched, like, the textbook definition of a Chiefs win on Monday. No, we didn't even have to wait an extra day. It wasn't even Sunday. This is fresh. This is 36 hours ago, right? And no world events between now and then could have you forget that you lost the pick by taking the Chiefs by more than a touchdown. Now, that being said, let's just stop it before it starts here. Next week, when the Chiefs are under a field goal one way or another against the Buffalo Bills,
let's roll.
Let's just take the Chiefs, man. Let's just do that. I promise it's going to be more fun. Bills might win. They have won these regular season games before. But, like, it's just way more fun when you're on the Kansas City Chiefs in that sort of pick 'em type game.
Hold on. I'm looking it up. Where is this game next week?
So it's in Buffalo.
In the Buff. Okay.
I love it. Like, and let's do it. Let's do a next week preview here. It's in Buffalo because you can bet on this stuff now. It's in Buffalo. Market ratings would suggest that the Bills would be a favorite, right? They have home field advantage. They are not far from a market, in the market. They're not far from the Kansas City Chiefs. It's literally, we like to talk out of 100, right? I got Chiefs at 68. I got Bills at 65.
Yep.
Right? So, like, you throw in some home field advantage and the Bills should be a small favorite. Look ahead line is Kansas City -1. Because society as a whole, as bleeped up as it is, has decided we are not making the Chiefs a underdog anymore. I don't care if it's a point and a half, 2.5, 3 on the road against the best team in the league, or at least the most highest rated team, like, whatever. No, like, it's not +1, it is -1. And is that going to matter all that much? No, because the game's probably not going to end in a tie, but just on vibes, we're just not doing it. So I just think that's kind of funny, where it's like, you could make Buffalo -1, or Buffalo -1, and it's not going to make a difference. But, like, no, we're not doing the whole, like, Chiefs as an underdog, Patrick Mahomes as an underdog thing. We're not doing it. And maybe we end up doing it by next week, but I doubt it.
We shall see. We shall see.
One last, really quick one on the Chiefs thing. Just want to get this in there. Short week. Yeah. Patrick Mahomes ankle.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. No. Interesting stuff. Is that Carson Wentz music?
He was so excited.
He really was. We move on to the Niners, who are coming off a bye week and are 5.5-point favorites on the road against the aforementioned Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are on a short week. I feel like this should be illegal. Teams coming off a bye to face a team on a short week, but yet here we are. So the Niners have that advantage. I'll say this. I don't want to lay 5.5 points on the road with many teams in many situations, but I'll say this. The Niners have that advantage of coming off the bye versus playing on the short week. The Niners have the coaching advantage, as you know, I'll rep for my boy Shanahan against Todd Bowles any day of the week. And there's also whispers of Christian McCaffrey's music coming out. And I feel like even if Christian McCaffrey, I mean, listen, I'm going to be honest.
Sorry.
I need to see Christian McCaffrey on the field and running the ball before I fully believe that Christian McCaffrey is actually going to play.
Right.
Right. But there's got to be a little more juice in the system, right? And I feel like where the Niners as a squad are, where the vibes are, you're coming off your bye week. This has to be your best performance. You're going to get a top tier performance from Kyle Shanahan with the full week to prepare with whomever the receiving core happens to be, right? Whoever is injured, Kittle gets a week to feel a little more healthy. If it's not, McCaffrey and it's Mason, he's at least getting another week to like rest that shoulder that was banged up. I don't want to lay 5.5 points here with the Niners on the road, but I'm going to lay the 5.5 points with the Niners on the road because I just feel like this is just a bad matchup for Tampa. It's not a good spot.
Yeah, or it could be Isaac Guerrero, who's like the fastest man alive, and they're just like third string. Sorry.
Yeah.
I again, yeah, like the sort of, I don't know, sharp, like whatever sort of thing would be like home underdog, right? And it's like, well, how well is that going the last 3 or 4 weeks, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, man, you set it up perfectly. It's short week against a good team that like was dying for a week off, right?
Yeah.
Just dying to be like, can we just not play this week? And then the NFL's like, yeah, sure, you don't have to play this week. And they're like, oh, that's an option. Sick. And yeah, you mentioned Christian McCaffrey like potentially coming back, and you're right. That is definitely like I'm going to need that. I'm going to have to, gonna have to see it. I'm going to need to see it. What? Holy cow!
You honestly reminded me last week. Like last week, you actually reminded me.
The guy who can barely talk.
No. But he was set up like they were saying heading into week 1. Christian McCaffrey could still play.
Week to week.
Like, oh yeah, that's what happened here.
Yeah.
And we're in week 10 and he hasn't touched the field. That's insane. Yeah. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, he is week to week. They week to week him all the way to November. Yeah, it's awesome. So, okay, let's try to get this thing back on the rails. So, okay, so the opening line for this game was 6.5.
Okay.
We are down. We got down to 5. And we're back up to 5.5. And you're okay, like, well, why? Yeah, so like, why were people interested in Tampa Bay? Well, the first thing, obviously, is that they had a pretty good competitive performance against the Chiefs last week. You go Chiefs, 49ers, Chiefs, 49ers. And then, so I'll put it this way, right? With the rating that the 49ers had against the Cowboys, their rating was 62 out of 100, right? Their estimated market rating. That would make them 4.5-point road favorites in this game. So if you go, well, the last time that the 49ers played, that would sort of imply that the Buccaneers here would be 4.5-point underdogs, and you're giving me 6.5. So like, that's a relatively key number. So yeah, I'm going to take the underdog there. So I guess the point is like, all right, if we try to figure out why people like the underdog in this game from a purely math market rating, what the point spread should be perspective, that move makes sense, right? Because I hate the idea of like, oh, there's like a 1.5-point move or something like that. And just being like, oh, I don't really know why, like, I can't even make sense of that because like from a market rating, standpoint, that doesn't make any sense, yada, yada, yada. You also want to probably upgrade the Buccaneers because of that performance, right? And those two things come in hand, whether it's like, I like the Buccaneers better than I thought I did, or I'm physically putting a number, assigning that to them. I would say that I'm a little bit concerned about the fact that they could not really find anybody other than Sterling Shepard from a wide receiver perspective.
Yeah.
That's not ideal.
Nope.
But so let's say I upgrade the Buccaneers a little bit here, right? I still obviously can't put them back to where we had them when Evans was there and Godwin were there, right? It's not the same. It's it's not as bad as it was or as people thought it was going to be before last week. But let's put it this way: if it's sort of all over the place here, I understand. But like, if you took Tampa Bay and Kansas City, and they played that game again, right? What would you make that point spread having watched that game? Because it's not 9. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
You know, and again, like you might be like, well, they kind of got it. You know, Tampa Bay got away with not being necessarily awesome on offense, et cetera, right? Like you probably make it around 7. So again, like you're upgrading the Buccaneers pretty significantly to where that line would sort of make sense. And you're getting them kind of close to an average team. And so again, that's why this number probably should be like 3 for Tampa Bay. But then what do you do with the 49ers? Because this is exactly, you know, all this to get back to your original point is, what are we going to get out of the 49ers? Because it's not 62.
Yeah.
Right? It's better than that, whether it's McCaffrey or whatever. You listed all the reasons why they might be sort of, playing to the high end of their range. Let's go back to like week 1 or early on in the season, right? Their original rating. They were in the 70s. They're Super Bowl contender, right? They're right there with the Ravens, right there with the Chiefs, and all this injury stuff has sent them backwards. So if we're going to move the Bucs based off of one game, like we probably need to move the 49ers at least, I don't know, back to a 70, expecting them to be sort of at their absolute best in this game. And when we move the 49ers back to that, we get back to 5. Right? So it's like we go from 6.5. Well, maybe it should be 3, but then what about the 49ers being good? And now we're back to 5. So the difference here, the thing that makes it or breaks it for me is the fact that the Buccaneers are on a short week. And so I liked them last week because they had 8 days to prepare for that game against the Chiefs. And they're coming off of a loss. Yes, they're still coming off a loss, but I think there's a little bit more like patting themselves on the back for hanging with the Chiefs in that game. And there could be more of a letdown in this game on a short week. And so when I'm saying to you, like, okay, I think this number is probably fair around 5, and I understand why it came down from 6.5. I also think this is like that game. This is kind of a deep pull, but you'll probably remember this. Remember the game against Jacksonville last year where the 49ers had just lost 3 games straight? It was like, down times, but they got a little bit healthier, right? Debo came back, and et cetera, et cetera. And they went into Jacksonville and just beat the brakes off of the Jacksonville Jaguars in that game. A team at the time before pre-Trevor Lawrence injury in that season that was on their way to being 8-3.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very similar situation where the 49ers just come in there. It's Tampa and like, okay, cool from a home field advantage perspective. But short week, like gave it all you had against Kansas City. Meanwhile, San Francisco had their feet up, just getting healthier, hopefully getting some of their guys back. Yeah, man, I think this is a really nice spot for Kansas City, for San Francisco to put the old beats down on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, and Niners minus 5.5 is the bet, and I will also bet that your man's Bosa will be fired up for no extra reason at all. But I will just move on to the next game and say the Steelers.
No extra reason. I did get no extra reason at all is a phrase I'm going to start using in my
The Steelers are at the Commanders. There's someone listening to this pod right now just like, yo, you guys are odd one this morning. And yes, that is true. That is true.
And the Steelers mentioned we're both Canadian, by the way. Just in case nobody picked up on, has figured that out. Yeah. It should just be reiterated that we're Canadian. So
yeah. The Steelers are in Washington. Washington favored by 3 points. I'm kind of confused by this line. Like, I understand, is this just the Commanders being, everyone's propping up the Commanders? The Commanders have become like a fun team to bet on. We obviously like watching Jaden Daniels, and people dislike the Steelers and people dislike Russ, despite the fact that Russ has just made them functional. It's not that he's made their offense great. It's not that, they're amazing, but all they needed was just basic functional quarterback play to match their amazing defense. And if you're going to tell me that, I'm going to take the plus 3 points here against a Commanders team that I don't really think is that great or as good as we're being told they are. You know what I mean? Especially after watching them against the Giants, who, again, are a bad team. The Giants aren't good, but, Commanders let them hang around. Why can't Russ hang around?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that characterization. You're right about the Russell Wilson thing, right? And if it's just a matter of providing a deep passing threat, right? Just the idea that just so you guys know, Russ might throw one deep here to Calvin Austin or George Pickens, and you might find out if you're not ready for it. And maybe even Mike Williams gets a jump ball thrown his way. One of the great jump ball catchers of our time that just no one threw him one against it when he was in New York. But I digress. Okay, so let's talk about the Commanders. You mentioned, like, is this people just like vibing pretty hard on the Commanders? So the Commanders are up to 58 out of 100. It is the sort of top end of their range. That's usually a pretty significant red flag. We haven't done this a ton necessarily this year, and like, I don't know, maybe we should bring it back a little bit more, maybe less. Who knows? People can weigh in on that if they like. With this rating, and with where Carolina's rating is, that Week 7 matchup where Carolina went to Washington and Washington was like 8-point favorites, 7.5-point favorites. That game, if it was played tomorrow, the Commanders would be 12.5-point favorites. Now, the Commanders blew the Panthers the hell out in that game. And so you go, yeah, okay, like that makes some sense, right? And that's where we get sort of all kinds of, confused or whatever. The two games around that, where they played at Baltimore, that line would have been minus 5.8, so like 5.5 or 6 instead of the 7 that it closed. And the week after they played Carolina, where Washington was host to the Bears, which we all recall, if the two teams are played again under this rating of the Commanders. Now, keep in mind, Jaden Daniels, we weren't sure if he was going to play and all of that kind of stuff, right? So we were in that nebulous zone. That line would be Washington minus 4.5. So you go, okay, like Washington ended up winning. They had a 12-point lead during that game. They also blew that 12-point lead and needed the Hail Mary to finish that game. So if you're basing all, this rating off of all of those results, you go like, well, okay, so I don't think they should be less of I don't think the points should be smaller against Baltimore because they lost that game to Baltimore by 7. So at the very least, it should have stayed 7 because that was a push on 7. I don't think they should be 4.5 at home to the Bears. Now, part of that is the Bears rating has taken a bit of a hit, but still, right? That's a 50-50-ish type game, quite almost literal definition. Carolina's a different story because, listen, it's Carolina. It's Carolina, right? Yeah, everybody blows out Carolina, right? And you can go back further if you wanted, right? Like Washington would be minus 5 against Cleveland when they were minus 3 that day. Washington would be a favorite on the road against Arizona when Arizona actually opened 5-point favorites. And again, Washington won that game, right? So they are earning this right to sort of be sort of given more respect. But the point is like, it's just an illustration that this is the highest point that the Washington Commanders have been rated. They've had some success when we've used that sentence before, but that sentence before was used when they were a 50, a 52, a 54, a 55. And the other thing I would say about that game against the Giants, right? They win that game, they cover against the Giants, right? So when we say, team wins and they cover, they usually get kind of a 2-point, not game bump, but like an estimated market rating bump, right? So if you're a 55, you go to 57, or 56, you go to 58. They're a 2-point conversion away from not covering that game, and they are an absolutely atrocious offensive pass interference call against the Giants away from that game being like really a lot more of a coin flip. So when you say the Giants aren't very good, and I think everybody agrees with you, being in that game in a very close game, or which should have been a closer game against the Giants, like doesn't for me really warrant that consideration for the Commanders. Now, I will say this line +3, you have to pay minus 120 to get that. We are hoping listen, it's drifting because it was 2.5 earlier on. I think here is a nice little teaser leg here, right? With most sort of widely available +2.5, so you can get it up to 8.5. I think we both probably expect a close game, if not, as you said, right, the possibility of the Steelers coming off their own bye week. I'm never really sure about Mike Tomlin off of a bye week. He does sort of feel like a guy who, like, you want to keep the, like, momentum of the season, if you will, like, the, that type of deal. So, I mean, we'll see. But I think this is a better teaser leg than anything else because I want to dare the Commanders to beat the Steelers by 9+ points in this game.
I like it. I like it a lot. Steelers +3 is what I am on as I keep it moving to the Vikings, who are 4-point road favorites in Jacksonville against the Jags. There was some worry as you watched a bit of that game against the Colts, or the Vikings coming down to earth. They hadn't looked like the world beaters that they were to start the season. But as you just described, maybe it could just be us watching teams play within their range, and teams can play at different ranges. I'll let you get to that point in a sec, because I find that very interesting. The flip side, though, is the Jags still employ their same coach. Just going to let that breathe for a little.
Still out there, yeah.
So I know that I should be, the rules say home dogs here, but I am not leaning there right now. I would need to be talked into taking said home dogs and the Jacksonville Jaguars here, just because I still feel like the Vikings defense is still good enough here to, have your man's Trevor Lawrence kind of seeing fits here, because there's nothing much that I've seen from Trevor Lawrence and company this whole season that tells me that they will be able to keep up with the Vikings, even if they aren't playing at the top of their range.
Yeah, and we thought that it was interesting, that game against the Vikings and the Colts, right? And we sort of all applied all of that line move to the idea that the Colts were getting Joe Flacco was going to start, right?
Yeah.
But kind of looking at, some of the look ahead lines and sort of doing a bunch of comparisons to try to kind of figure out, okay, like how does the market truly feel, right? Because there are lines out for next week, for example, right? Where Minnesota goes to Tennessee. They are 6-point road favorites right now against Tennessee. And so you can take that line, extrapolate a rating out of that with the Titans and then cross-reference it with the Jags and whatever, right? It's a longer show to explain that. And so what I've kind of come up with is that looking back at last week and that line move going down to 5, that had a lot more to do with the Vikings being sold on after losing back-to-back games to the Rams and to the Lions. And if I had known that beforehand, nothing changes because I bet Minnesota anyway, so we won the bet and all that sort of thing. But I would have been more surprised about that, because I am surprised about that. You know what I mean? That is a very sort of surprising result to me. And so a Vikings team that had a rating going into that Rams game or going into the Lions game of all the way up into the mid 60s, like the early to mid 60s, 63, 64, something like that, is now being rated back down at 59. And I just go I don't hate those losses from the Vikings in those two games enough to downgrade them really at all, but certainly downgrade them underneath a 60, right? Where they're essentially on par right now from a rating perspective with the Chargers, the Bengals, and as we just mentioned, the Commanders. I don't know that I have the Vikings down in that. I mean, it's not much higher, but it is higher than those teams, I think. And then you look at the Jags, and if you were just like a Jaguar fan who just bet on them every week, you would have 3 straight covers with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Okay.
Right? They won and covered in London that second game against the Patriots when we had, Doug Peterson, a popular football podcast is calling him, Coach Middle Seat, because he should have been on the middle seat back from London in between those two games. And it's a great nickname. Don't get me wrong. Terrible bettors, but really good nickname makers. So they covered the last 3 games. It's really? Yeah. They backdoored that Packers thing, sort of backdoored that Packers thing. They got every break imaginable in that Eagles game last week, as far as getting back in the game, getting basically 14 straight points off of, they went on a 14-0 run, essentially, in basketball terms. And so the rating hasn't really moved, and maybe it's gotten moved up a little bit because maybe the Vikings rating moves back up a little bit and the Jaguars rating moves back up again. I think the Vikings move back up again makes sense. I don't have the Jags moving on up from where they were. I don't, right? I don't buy. I watched both those games pretty intently. Yeah. I'm not buying it, right? So I grabbed -4 with the Vikings, and I was happy to do it. Didn't think we'd ever get to 3.5 or, amazingly 3. Don't think we will. If we do, honest to God, I'll probably bet it again. I think the Vikings are underrated at this point. Again, it's tough because it's they're going on the road for this game. They're going on the road for the next game against Tennessee. But honestly, why are the Vikings only 6-point favorites against Tennessee? What did Tennessee deserve? You know what I mean? To be under. And again, in this season, this part of the season, where the road favorite is doing so well, especially against these certified bad teams, why would I be afraid to lay the points here with a team that I think is at least sort of an NFC adjacent contender. They're contender adjacent, if you will, against a Jags team that they covered these last 2 games, but they didn't win. So
exactly
in the room, the vibes can't be all that high, right? So yeah, I think it's a good spot for the Vikings.
I like it. I'm with you there on the Vikings, as
And they
the
should have
vibes.
killed the Colts last week. They should have won that game by 20, right? Speaking of box score and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, nope, totally there, right there with you. Vikings -4 on the road. Let's go to the Patriots at the Bears. And I'm staring at this line, and I can't lie to you, just now as you were talking, I was just triple checking that I didn't write this down wrong, because it says Bears -6, and just Bears -6 against anybody. I'm very confused here. I'm very confused.
Oh, you think it's high?
I do think it's high. I'm confused because I'm just like, listen, I get it. I get it. And here's my question. And yes, this is one of those things where you watch the last play. I can't say I watched in depth. I'm not the person that watched in depth what the Patriots did last week, but Drake May making plays, some form of functionality there, but running. Yeah. Scrambling, buying time, lots of stuff going on there, but they lose. Lose in OT. Cool. Now they get the Bears, who, again, I don't really want to lay 6 points with the Bears against anybody, but if there's one thing the Bears have done this season, it's they've beaten bad teams, right? I mean, the Bears, they sit at 4-4. I know against the spread, it's gotten a little dicey the last few weeks, but at the end of the day, I mean, they've beaten who this year? The Titans, the Rams when they were struggling, the good old Panthers, the aforementioned Jacksonville Jaguars, right? I feel like the Patriots qualify within that rating, but is 6 the right number here?
Well, it's closer to the right number than it was when this line opened, which was Bears -7.
Okay.
So one, you would have been appalled by that.
Definitely.
If you're offended by the 6, you would have been appalled by the 7. Mm-hmm. And so obviously money came in, and it's funny, I hesitated, right? So I didn't get the 7. I was like, Patriots should. I mean, I probably should, but no, I don't want to. And then of course it's 6. You blink, right? And it's 6.
Yeah.
So I haven't made a bet on this game. Part of my hesitation was. Okay, well, let me backtrack a little bit. I had an moment, right? Because when you do content and obviously I'm betting all of this stuff. Everybody knows that. But there's an element of having to have a decision by Wednesday, by Thursday, by Friday, right? I mean, it's Wednesday morning, right? You're asking my opinion on all of these games. And I'm happy to do it. And we work through a lot of this stuff together. But I had this moment when I forget who tweeted it out. I hate it when people say I forget who tweeted it out, but I only just kind of thought of it back again now when you were talking about listing all of those teams. And it was essentially the Bears have faced one of the easiest schedules this season, and the Cardinals have faced one of the hardest schedules this season. Okay. And I go, that's troublesome when you're literally getting Bears against Cardinals last week. And I am on record and have bet the Bears already. And so I was like, God, I really wish I had known that before I got into it. Yeah. And so it's good that you bring this up, right? You brought it up with the Bills, right? And so hopefully we maybe sort of pinpointed something there with regards to the Colts and all that kind of thing. So the Bears market rating was would have made them about 7.4 in this game. And that's based on going into last week's game. So you're going to downgrade the Bears based off of last week's game. And so that's why you got to the 7. And then the market was like, no, we're downgrading the Bears further than that. And that's why you have it down to 6, right? And so you can say this is just, there's 2 ways to look at it. Is it just a function of, well, the point spread is this. We think this game is going to be closer than that. And therefore the Patriots should be a bet. And therefore the line comes down. Or do you think of it as, well, the Bears were overrated the last few weeks. They need to be, downgraded. Maybe even upgrade the Bears or the Packers. Maybe say one more team and I'll get it. The Patriots. Maybe upgrade the Patriots a little bit because, like you said, Drake May is providing a little bit more. My guy had almost 100 yards rushing last week. Yeah. And so, it doesn't look all that smooth, and maybe he's a little too quick to get out of the pocket and run, but at least that's a danger element that a lot of teams' quarterbacks don't necessarily have. And so 6 makes a lot of sense when you start downgrading teams and upgrading teams and all of that sort of thing. And so all that is to say, like, I missed the boat on +7. And now that it's 6, I don't really have anything for you. Because, again, I don't really want to trust the Patriots on the road. And you're right. Like, the Bears at home have at least been better. And so maybe they play to the higher end of their range. And maybe that's not their, you put it this way, right? Like, the Bears rating last week was like, high 40s essentially. And that's within their range. Mm-hmm. It's just not their average effort. Right. Mm-hmm. And so if we think that maybe the Bears have one more big, good game, high end, like level range type game, then maybe they're a pretty good bet this week. Because I could see them winning this game by a touchdown or 2 touchdowns. Like you said, we saw them blow out the Panthers and again, play a little bit better at home. And the longer the season goes, in theory, the offense is getting better, but the offensive line is still bad. But can the Patriots take advantage of that? I wouldn't have said the Cardinals could last week, but the Cardinals did. So I don't know, man. I don't know. And I know that's not a fun answer, but I don't know.
No. This was a close one. But I'm going to stick to the just it being at 6 points. It's a lot for me to lay with the Bears under any circumstances. And if they cover it by a touchdown and they win, cool. I'll tip my cap to them and solidify. Yeah, you guys beat bad teams. More power to you. We'll discuss that again next week.
Teams at home too, right?
Yeah.
They haven't played a home game in 3 weeks, right? They had a bye week and then 2 road games.
And they play a lot better. They don't win on the road, right? Is that the thing with Eberflus?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like we're talking London bye week, 2 road games.
Yeah. Tough.
So like we don't even remember, right? Like I don't even remember what it looks like for them to play at Soldier Field, right? And so to me that's concerning, where it's like we could watch a game against a bad team like the Patriots and have them playing at home, and even though like it seems like Eberflus should be on that same middle seat, even though he's in Chicago, right? It's just like, oh yeah, like home game, like yeah, they are professionals, right? We always tend to like sort of have the idea that like, oh, team's dead halfway through the season, like Dallas Cowboys, they're dead. It's like, well, they're all professional football players. And if you move the bar, right? If you move the bar the way that and go back to the Eagles-Cowboys game here, but like if you move the bar to the point where the bar is just don't lose by 8 at home against Philadelphia, then that's an easier bar to hop over. And here, if the bar is, oh, you just need to beat the Patriots at home by a touchdown, that's an easier bar to jump over.
I don't know if I've done this before. Reverse the Chiron truck, or that means nothing to normal people watching this. But the control room, going back in time to change the key, change the graphic on the screen. The pick has been changed. The flag is out. Bears -6. Bears at home. Bears -6. Pick changed. We are moving on to our next game. But lots going on here on this pod on this Wednesday morning. And I mean, I'm going to look back on this moment on Sunday and be like, you know what? This was a great move, taking the Bears at home when I watch how bad the Patriots are. Just a reminder needed. Okay. Bad teams that beat other bad teams. Very key betting thing here. I look up and the next game is Falcons, 3.5 point favorites on the road against a very bad team, the New Orleans Saints. Do I want to lay 3.5 points with the Falcons on the road? No. But do I want to have anything to do with the Saints? Do they qualify for a new coach bump? Like, I don't even know what's going on here with the Saints. And I mean, the vibes are just horrible. Whether you're a current member of the Saints or a past member of the Saints, just chirping the life out of Derek Carr. Poor Derek Carr just getting crushed from every angle. And meanwhile, the Falcons just keep plugging away. I mean, I feel like they got the division all wrapped up. I saw Kirk Cousins in a swag surfing feature last week on ESPN's pregame show. Like, vibes are high. Yeah. Vibes are working well. 3.5 points, I feel like, if you are the team that you're supposed to be right now, Falcons.
Okay.
You win this game easily against a bad Saints team. That's all.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, all that sounds good. I again,
maybe the Falcons aren't the team they're supposed to be. That's what I'm saying.
I frame everything, as you know, quantitatively, right? We sit at a bar stool, right? We talk about the game, the teams, and I tell you, like, all right, or via a podcast, I tell you how I feel about a team from like a very numerical perspective because I want to be clear and concise, right?
Big facts.
And so the Falcons, as we've talked about them, have been like rated as that average team. And then we watch them go into that game against Dallas and I go like, guys, I don't think the Falcons are just an average team. I think they are a better than average team. Mm-hmm. So we need to rate them like they are a better than average team. And if we did, we would have them more than -2.5, which is what they were on Wednesday. And I would say they're probably better than -3, which is where the line was on Friday. And then when the line came around on Sunday and it was -3.5, it was like, yeah, that's probably fair, right? Like it's just like, yeah, well, okay, like we're probably good there, guys. We're probably super good.
Okay.
And of course they cover that game. And so everybody, we all get to like pat ourselves on the back. Like we, bet on a favorite and they won. And like, that was great. And by the way, like it should be noted that their new rating with the Cowboys new rating, the down version of that, would result in the Falcons being an 8-point favorite in that game. Like if they played that game over again tomorrow.
I got you.
Well, they won the game by 6, I believe it was. So if you just go, all right, like either the Falcons are being overrated this week or the Cowboys are being underrated, right? Because like, I don't know how you get to 8. Right?
I got you. Yeah.
I think the answer to that is both, right? So I go, yeah, like Falcons, like, probably shouldn't be that because they get the home win against home loss against Seahawks. Then they go on the road and they get the Buccaneers in the first week without their wide receivers. And by the way, they give up 330 yards passing.
Yeah. So
the team that we saw from the Buccaneers, and again, rain, Kansas City's defense, way different circumstance. I get that, but that same offensive roster, got 500 yards or something like that. Against that team. 500 is a stretch, but it was like 330 yards passing plus whatever it was rushing.
Yeah.
And then they get the Cowboys, again, a team that we don't really think all that highly of. And so those three things, I mean, the Seattle thing was a loss, so they're obviously not getting upgraded on that. You're getting upgraded on the idea that you beat the Buccaneers. Okay. And then you get upgraded on the idea of beating that Cowboys team. Okay. Let's say that's fair. 55 out of 100, I think, is a pretty good upgrade from where it was last week. And I think that's a pretty fair number. Now, what's the point spread with the Saints off of that against the Carolina Panthers? And again, as we talked about, right, it wasn't a box score loss. It was a scoreboard loss.
Yeah.
And if you blame the coach for that and you remove him, then maybe you sort of cut sort of a bit of a tumor, if you will, out of the situation. But again, I have to look at the box score and be like, man, you know what? The Saints weren't that bad. And again, Derek Carr is back. So you can't just go, well, it's not the Saints, the version of the Saints that was Spencer Rattler, unable to sort of, complete a forward pass and all that sort of thing. Do anything, right? And so we go, all right, well, if the Falcons are 55 and this is a 3.5 point, favorite on the road situation, what does that make the Saints? And the answer to that is 35 out of 100. And you're going to say, you might say, well, they just lost to the Panthers, so that's probably fair. But I'm going to tell you again, from a box score perspective, they doubled them in yardage.
Okay.
And all of those other things, right? Where it's, again, if you put that output on the field on a weekly basis, you're going to win a lot of games, for one, and you're going to be in a lot of games, for number two. And so you're back at home and all of those sorts of things here. And now we're getting 3.5 points because one team's rated pretty high and another team is beyond their range. The Derek Carr range for the Saints has always been like 40 to 55.
Yeah.
Right? Like on the best day, right? Against the first game against the Panthers and the Cowboys, it's like, yeah, they're playing at a 54. Like, remember they were like favored against the Eagles in week 3? We thought pretty highly of the team then. Now, obviously, a lot has happened. They literally have lost every single game since then. So again, maybe they are 35. But I'm saying but a lot of those games were without Derek Carr. I think they probably beat the Broncos if they have Derek Carr. I don't know.
Well, they have a way better chance than Spencer Rattler did.
They certainly have a better chance. And that's my point, right? Is that even if you say, okay, bottom of the range, bottom of the Derek Carr range here for the Saints, and we say, okay, they are a 40 out of 100. They are a below average team. They are not a playoff team. They are this, that, or whatever. That point spread gives you Falcons -2.
Yeah.
And this is a Falcons team that, like, 2 weeks ago, we were talking about how we didn't really feel that comfortable laying 2.5 or 3 points because they love to win by 1 point so
Correct.
frequently. So could you tell me that the Falcons win this game by 3 on the road? With maybe Drake London being out for this game, one of their best, obviously red zone threats. We'll see, obviously. It's Wednesday. Who knows? Yeah, like, you might be saying up to this point, like, Matt, there's a couple of road favorites in there, a couple of big favorites in there for you. You haven't got really all that grimy yet. Maybe the Colts pick was a little grimy. Guess what? We're headed to Grimetown here with the Saints here, +3.5.
Here we are. The flag is out. The flag is out. I mentioned this might be the week where certain reminders at certain points, back to some basic principles, all these things that Matt said. And, you're talking about a divisional matchup, home team being underdogs by more than a field goal. I mean,
count you in.
Where do I sign up for that? The Derek Carr experience. Let's go. Back at it again. Let's keep it going, though. We got the Titans, who are taking on the Chargers. Chargers at home, favored by 7.5 points. I struggle with that because that is a lot of points, kids. So, of course, I'm going to start by leaning on said Tennessee Titans and the 7.5 points, because I feel like the credit that I've liked to give the Chargers this season was the functionality that Harbaugh has brought. Stability and identity. We at least can run the ball, and that makes things easier for a pretty good quarterback in Mr. Herbert. And they've done a good job. But that functionality, or that baseline of function that we haven't really seen from the Chargers in a long time, still doesn't get me to want to lay 7.5 points with them.
Yeah, no, I get it. That makes it,
it's tough. Yeah,
it makes sense. I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you here. I think this line should be higher.
Woo!
I do.
That's what I want to hear. Okay.
So what do we do, right? Like, we take a team's rating, we, take it from based off of, like, how the market feels about the team. They were road favorites against the Browns last week. That didn't go particularly well for those of us on the Browns because we had higher expectations for Cleveland. But the thing about the Chargers is, and we get so caught up in the fantasy footballification of the NFL, like, we just forget about, like, playing good football. And it doesn't mean that the Chargers are going to play good football in every game, because sometimes they fumble the ball on the 1 yard line because they have a practice squad wide receiver in a game because Quentin Johnston is out with an injury and another guy's out with an injury, and all of a sudden Jalen Reagor is involved in your life. And then sometimes you intercept Kyler Murray, and that big lumbering defensive player fumbles the ball right back to the Cardinals. And those two things result in a Cardinals team beating you. Cardinals team that, by the way, has some pretty decent results this season, and certainly has had some decent results since that result. So that loss, very excusable because of how they screwed up those essentially 2 plays, looks a lot better as the season goes on. But what I mean with the Chargers is, like, if you screw up, Justin Herbert will find you, right? Yeah. So the Browns, the key to that game last week was the Browns 3rd and 21, 3rd and 14. Total coverage, just absolute blowing. I almost said something else there. You know what I mean? And it's like, and the Chargers are good enough, and Herbert's good enough to be like, oh man, like, you screwed that up. I'm going to hit my guy in stride wide open down the field. And it's weird to say, but, like, there's just not enough quarterbacks who are capable of sort of seeing that happen and taking advantage of it. And the Chargers have that. The Titans certainly don't have that. A lot of teams don't really have that, right? Where you get the replay and the guy's like waving and he's like, I'm wide open, and he got missed because your quarterback isn't very good. Yeah, like, I'm here. And there's like 5 to 10 dudes who, like, reliably can find that. And Herbert is one of those guys. And so I just think about, like, okay, what's the final score of this game going to be? And I think the Chargers need to get to like 20 to cover like 7.5. Yeah. Because I honestly, like, how did the Titans get to like 13 or 14 points? They couldn't do it at home last week, or they could barely do it at home last week to the Patriots. Yeah. And it's like, is it Mason Rudolph? Is it Will Levis? And, like, do I care? Right? And so, if you're not, but I understand why you wouldn't be comfortable, because the thing is, like, we get obsessed with the idea of like big time offensive team can cover point spread because they score a lot. And then we actually watch the teams that are good win 24-10 and cover every point spread that you could possibly throw at them.
Yeah.
But what I would want to do in this game, because if you are still not all that comfortable with laying that many points with the Chargers because you're not buying in, one, you need to know that, again, it's not that the Chargers are getting rated off the planet here. They're rated, as we talked about earlier, around where, high 50s, where it's like Bengals, Commanders, things of that nature.
Yeah, and they're better than those teams.
But what I was going to say is, if you're not comfortable with it, A, understand that the point spread is fair, and it might be even a little bit low. But two, teaser town. We already like the Steelers moving that teaser leg up. We need a second teaser leg. Chargers, getting them down to -1.5. Do you feel better about that now? Knowing all you need to get is a field goal win, and the Chargers might have the best kicker in the entire league.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. The pick has been changed. People watching it saw the flag waving. Chargers -7.5. And of course, as just mentioned, sprinkle on a little teaser action there as well. We'll keep things going here. A couple more games left. We got the Jets at the Cardinals. Cardinals at home at 1.5 favorites here. And the Cardinals have been rolling, and this is going to sound really weird. This is just me hating on the Cardinals. And I don't know, like I'm, it's just
little reason for it. Yeah.
I'm not buying what they're selling, despite the fact that they've been, looking pretty good the last few weeks, but I'm still just not buying what they're selling here. And it's almost like me trying to get ahead of the told you so, which I don't know if that's going to come, but I also don't know if the Jets should be the team that I'm banking on that coming against. Either way, I'm on the Jets plus 1.5 because I just think the Jets can win this game outright as well.
Yeah, they could. They certainly could win this game outright. I look at it this way. I talked about it on my podcast on Friday, right after the Jets Texans game, right? Because the big thing going into that game, as we talked about, was the idea like, oh, the Jets are favored in this game. How could the Jets be favored? Is this by because of Stephon Diggs? Is this because of this reason, that reason, whatever? And I didn't really want anything to do with either side, so I just went Jets team total under 21.5.
Yeah. Jets
ended up scoring 21. Shout out to my guy, Malachi Corley, I believe is his name. Who knows what would have happened if you hadn't dropped that ball. Maybe they still scored 21 points, whatever. But again, the point is, watching that game closely, you go, all right, the Jets get 2 touchdowns from Garrett Wilson. They obviously got a touchdown late from Devontae Adams. But those Garrett Wilson touchdowns were a centimeter away from not being touchdowns, both of them, right?
Yeah.
Great throws, great catches, all of that sort of thing. Kudos to them for completing those passes, getting those touchdowns in that moment. Did I feel like this was something that was replicable going forward for the Jets? I did not. Right? And so I look at that game and I go, cool, we want to bet under 21.5 team total. So we end up profitable. Don't have to have any sort of, harbor any sort of anger to, the Texans or the Jets or whatever. But watching the game, you go, okay, well, why were the Jets favored in this game? And was it because of people liking the Jets? And was that proven to be correct? Like the liking of the Jets, was that the correct idea? Or was it not liking the Texans, which is why the Jets were favored in that game? And you're watching the Texans and you're going like, CJ Stroud, just like he's got nothing going on other than like a scramble out of the pocket and run for 3 yards because the offensive line's caving in. They have a great run game. He's getting 100 yards out of Joe Mixon. And that was the thing that we talked about. Like, if you like the Texans or you think the Texans can compete in this game, it's because they still have something offensively.
They got something
in Joe Mixon, right? But again, you end up losing by like this much, quite literally. And meanwhile, your kicker, Kaimi Fairbairn's making 60-yarders against the Bills to win it, and then like can't make a 30-yarder against the Jets. And you're like, this is the NFL, right? This is the roulette wheel ball, and like sometimes it just goes in the wrong spot. And you just go, I don't know, like why is the kicker good one week and terrible the next week? I have no idea.
Yeah.
So my point is like the Jets win that game, and so their rating from that game, which made them at 2-6 a favorite against a 6-2 team, doesn't change. Because they won the game. They covered. Why would we change the Jets rating? While I'm watching the game going like, I still don't think this team is any good.
Yeah.
And if I still don't think they're any good, then I think in my mind, in my ratings, that they should be less than a 55. And it doesn't matter what number I have. I could have 45. I could have 48. I can tell you whatever made up number I want. My point is that it's not 55. And so if they're rated like a 55, and then Arizona has these good results and they win, and all of a sudden they're considered an above average team, and the Jets here are only 1 point underdogs here. You know, you got 1.5 up there. Obviously, when we get into these 1s and 1.5s, it's really more just sort of the conversation about juice. I just look at this and I go like, I can believe in what the Cardinals are doing, because obviously I mentioned that stat about them playing this really difficult schedule up until this point. So they're probably better than their record is. And maybe the Jets are a little bit better than their record, but I don't have them at 55 out of 100. I think they are overrated still. And if you are overrated still, I am looking to bet against you. And again, it's not comfortable because, as you said, like, it's easy to hate on the Cardinals because it all just kind of looks like it could go bad at any given moment. I totally get that.
Yeah.
But this is kind of, honestly, it's weird because it's the Cardinals in both weeks. This is kind of like when Miami came back with Tua. And it was like, I don't believe in that rating for the Miami Dolphins. Mm-hmm. I'm not there.
I'll be honest. These are two teams that I dislike, both of them. Like, it's just like, I'm not like, I can't really tell you that I like either of these teams or believe in any of these teams.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a tough one though, for
You're
sure.
Like, I don't care for you.
Yeah. I mean, we can move on to the team that I do care about though. Sunday Night Football, big time matchup. The Detroit Lions, 3.5 point road favorites in Houston, taking on the Texans. And again, this might be a spot if, you know, I felt better about the health of said Texans offensive weapons that primed to take the Texans as home dogs. This is another one where maybe I just need to be talked into the principles of the home dogs here. Okay. But the Lions maybe have become my Chiefs of the NFC in terms of just enjoying to bet on them, because they just got the play sometimes that you're not stopping that play. Like, I don't know what the answer is to that play. The Lions are rolling right now. And I feel like I will, much like I said, trying to get ahead of the Cardinals falling, I'm going to keep riding the Lions until I'm told to stop riding the Lions, if that makes sense. I'm going to ride them for one extra week, you know, and then be like, they had the bad week. That's all right. We just had like 5 good weeks in a row. Just rolling with the Lions. That's how I feel about them, even though it's over field goal at 3.5. I get it. I understand. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I had zero problem with anything you just said. Ride them away. Like, just go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
And the Texans, I mean,
life's too short, man. Life is too short. I like there's a cameo appearance of them being 3-point favorites, and I jumped on that thing and I rode it around the parking lot. I did. I mean, Lions -3 was like a yes for me. And again, who knows, right? It's football. Things can happen. Blah blah blah. Whatever. No, again, this is a team that covers all the time against the Texans team that I don't know that we have found the sort of floor on their rating, right? It's starting to creep down, and we are down in that sort of like low 50s area. Could be lower than that.
For sure.
Right? We don't know.
And this is a big spot for a Lions team that continues to roll no matter what. So will they be fired up for Sunday Night Football? I think so. They're
just always fired up, man.
Yeah, like, that's what I'm saying.
There aren't good spots, bad spots, whatever. Like Jared Goff, do you want to take this game off? You don't have to actually throw the ball. 2 straight games where it's just like, yeah, man, like we don't really need you for this game. And it's like, yeah, well, this game, like, yeah, I bet you probably could do pretty well statistically against the Texans.
Big facts. One last game here. Monday Night Football. Funny how that works, isn't it? One last game and it's Monday Night Football. The Miami Dolphins in LA to take on the Rams. Rams at home, 2.5 point favorites. And I'm going to start this off by saying something that I know nobody cares about but me, but I lost fantasy football because Puka Nacua decided that it'd be a good idea to throw a punch in an NFL game. And he cost me my week of fantasy, and I'm currently in first place, but they are gaining on me now. Thank you, Puka. As we move on to the games and things that people care about, I am on the LA Rams laying the 2.5 points just because Matthew Stafford, and I don't know if this is just an NFL in which there's not that many good quarterbacks, but like watching Matthew Stafford when he has his weapons back,
Fun as hell.
and he's rolling and him and Banger, you know, there's just a vibe. There's an energy there. And I can roll with the Rams here in this game against a coach that I actually believe in versus McDaniels, Money Mike, who I don't believe in at all, and Tua and this whole offense that, yes, it looked better last week. I get it, but I still think it's like a crypto scam or something, the Miami Dolphins. Not buying into them at all. Give me the Rams laying the 2.5 points. I still think Miami are pretenders, even with Tua back.
I do like the idea of like labeling teams like sociological situations, and Miami Dolphins as a crypto scheme like is really good.
You can't see Mike McDaniel leading a crypto scam. Come on,
the whole thing just speaks to me. Absolutely. Like I want to sit down and do all 32 teams and like come up with like societal like things that they are. Okay. Right. Like, I mean, Kyler Murray, the Arizona Cardinals, right? Like they're Call of Duty, right? They're just, that's just what they are. Yep. Right. So Dolphins crypto scheme, you know, I don't what again, we go down a rabbit hole. Maybe that's a summer project. Somebody remind me. Somebody out there remind me next summer when I'm dying for like some sort of content for the Substack that like we need to do on 32 teams, like what they are in the world. God, that'd be great if somebody actually reminded me. Anyway, like this is me not liking the Dolphins still. Like this is me like being pro Rams. I think that was a really big, the last 2 weeks, right? Really big wins for the Rams. Again, like we don't handicap based on vibes, but like the Rams are kind of like a high level vibes team. Again, I don't know what the best sociological, you know, society comparison to just like vibe, you know, being the best at vibing, like, but the Rams are right up there at like being really good at vibing, right? And Sean McVay is like all up on Matthew Stafford being like, you're the man, like blah, blah, blah. And like, yeah, Puka punching people, you know, doesn't cost them the game. And then Demarcus Robinson out here catching multiple touchdowns per game and all that stuff. Like it's feeling good. Jared Verse is becoming a problem out there for opposing offensive lines, right? So like they hit on the draft, like that's always an important thing. And yeah, man, like, you know, they traded Trey White as if like that guy was really doing it, you know, anything. Like it's all working for me, man. It's all working for me. And you're getting under a field goal here because people are still into the crypto scam. Yeah, I like all of the Rams. Just
Tua's so back, and remember Tyreek Hill's the best player in the league, right?
Sure,
remember those conversations.
Tua coin, man.
Yeah.
Tua coin. You got to get your Tua coin.
Tua coin. That's amazing. Oh man. Well, that was a wild episode of this podcast. I can't wait to hear the feedback.
Chance it wasn't going to be. Yeah, I mean that'd be.
I cannot wait to hear the feedback from our viewers because we appreciate it all. But where can the people find you online to get more of the information as we head into all of the week 10 action?
That was a fun episode. And honestly, like, I really do love the board this week. And I think, like, I'm just going to say it. I think we're just going to win every game. I think we're just going to win every game. No. Imagine that turn of events on this Wednesday that we just, like, get everything right. Yes. All right. Everything that we do, you can find over at mrusauthentic on Twitter. That will take you, because you will not miss it, that will take you over to my Substack. It's called The Window. It is a podcast. It is written work. It is all the stuff that I used to write over at The Score. It is all the stuff that we talk about with regards to sports betting here. It is... and it is free for this calendar season. I don't know if calendar season makes sense because the season goes beyond just the calendar of 2024.
I got it.
But it gives you a full season to check things out. And if you like it and you're having fun and we're winning a few bets here and there, we got some fun futures positions and we're cashing a big bet here or there, then you sign up next year for the not so complimentary version, as we will go to a paid system next season. So you get a free, I mean, what else do you want? Like people be like, oh, free 1 week trial. And it's cool. Yeah, that's great. But like, I'm going to forget that I even have this free week trial until like you tell me that I've got 1 day left in the free week trial. How about a free year-long trial? That's a pretty good deal, right? So yeah, come on,
good.
check it out. Are we having as much fun as Sheldon and I have every Wednesday morning? That's debatable, but we're at the very least informative and mostly profitable over at the window on Substack. Just type in substack.com and then the window, sports betting, you'll find it.
Got to be honest, the vibes were a little off heading into this pod, but
we
feeling good after the
out.
pod. I can't really lie. The vibes are feeling a whole lot better after
some stuff out before the show started. Yeah.
Yes, definitely did. Hopefully the vibes keep rolling into improving my record as we head into this weekend as well. To find out more information from me, you can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Shell Alexander and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And of course, like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. It's Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube. Rate us, review us, all that other fun stuff, because I really did used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic, especially today. Until next time, see ya.